July 1943. Southern sector of the Kursk salient near Prokhorovka. Dawn breaks over rolling wheat fields as the German II SS Panzer Corps advances. 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte, 2nd SS Das Reich, 3rd SS Totenkopf, spearheaded by 45-ton Tiger I heavy tanks and long-barreled Panzer IV Osv. GS across the horizon. Nearly 800 Soviet tanks from the 5th Guards Tank Army surge forward. Engines roar. Tracks chew into black soil. In less than 24 hours, roughly 200 armored vehicles will collide in what July 1943 will remember as the largest tank battle in history. At 1,000 meters, the Tiger's 88 Bomben Kelb K-36 gun, an anti-aircraft weapon adapted for tank use, hurls armor-piercing shells that slice through a T-34's 45 mm frontal plate. German optics magnify targets with lethal clarity. Soviet crews close the distance to under 300 meters, where their 76.2 mm guns can strike flanks. This is not theory. It is metal against metal, measured in seconds. During Operation Citadel in July 1943, General Paul Hosser's 2nd SS Panzer Corps pushed toward Prokhorovka with fewer than 300 operational tanks. Soviet commander Pavel Rotmistrov hurled the 5th Guards Tank Army directly into their path. Tigers destroyed T-34s at ranges beyond a kilometer, but Soviet formations swarmed, ramming and firing on the move. By nightfall on July 12, smoke columns marked hundreds of wrecks. German crews reported staggering kill ratios in the opening hours. A Leibstandarte officer wrote that the 8 Bomben women knocked out enemy tanks as if on a training range. Yet the battlefield told a harsher story. Mines tore tracks from 45-ton holes. Anti-tank guns struck vulnerable sides. Smoke blinded precision optics. Mechanical failures immobilized vehicles no shell had pierced. The Red Army's General Staff later noted that close assault tactics neutralized the enemy's long-range superiority. That detail matters. The Tiger's 100 doubly rooted frontal armor and high-velocity gun promised dominance, but dominance required space, coordination, and logistics. By 1943, German industry could not replace losses as swiftly as the Soviet Union. A technological supremacy collided with strategic exhaustion. To understand how German armor evolved into such formidable, yet fragile, giants, the story must rewind to 1939, when speed, radios, and doctrine mattered more than steel thickness. A Panzer I training tank turned combat vehicle Panzer I, OSFO Rung A and B. When it first rolled out in 1934, this 5-ton machine was never meant to fight a modern war. Its thin 13,000 nubbied armor could barely stop rifle fire. Its armament, twin 7.92 mm MG-13 machine guns, offered suppression, not destruction. Yet by September 1939, more than 400 Panzer I tanks filled the ranks of Germany's expanding panzer divisions. What began as a classroom on tracks would ignite the opening act of Blitzkrieg. Designed under the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles, the Panzer I trained crews in radio communication, formation movement, and combined arms tactics. It carried a crew of 2, driver and commander, who also aimed and fired the guns. This was not a battlefield predator. It was a mobile laboratory. But its greatest weapon sat unseen. A FUG-2 radio set in nearly every vehicle, enabling real-time coordination across kilometers of shifting front. On the 1st September 1939, during the invasion of Poland, Panzer I tanks made up nearly 40% of the 700 German tanks deployed. The 4th Panzer Division under General Georg Hans Reinhardt drove toward Warsaw at relentless speed. Polish anti-tank rifles pierced Panzer I armor at close range, and artillery shattered thin hulls. Germany lost roughly 320 tanks in the campaign, many of them Panzer I models. Yet momentum never collapsed. Columns advanced day and night. In May 1940, during the Battle of France, Panzer I vehicles supported General Heinz Guderian's CX Panzer Corps at Sedan. German engineers forced crossings of the Meuse River within 48 hours. French defenses crumbled under synchronized airstrikes and armored thrusts. Speed replaced mass. Coordination replaced armor thickness. A Polish Army field diary from September 1939 observed that German tanks were thin-skinned, but they came in waves and never stopped. French after-action reports in 1940 echoed the assessment: the machines were light, but their timing was devastating. The shock came not from steel, but from synchronization. By 1941, during Operation Barbarossa, the Panzer I faced Soviet T-34s with 40 mm sloped armor and 76.2 mm guns. It stood no chance. Production had already ceased in 1937 after about 500 units. Surviving chassis became command vehicles and self-propelled guns. Doctrine had worked. Technology had moved on. If the Panzer I proved coordination could overcome weakness, mobility paired with real firepower. Panzer II, the transitional light tank Panzer II, Ausführung C, introduced in 1936 as a temporary solution. This 9-ton light tank carried a 20-mun K30 autocannon and armor ranging from 14.5 mm to 30 mm. It was never intended to dominate heavy armor. It existed to bridge a dangerous gap until true medium tanks arrived. By 1940, nearly 900 Panzer II vehicles rolled off assembly lines, forming almost 30% of Germany's frontline armored strength as Blitzkrieg thundered across Europe. The 20-mm autocannon fired high-velocity shells capable of shredding infantry and light vehicles at several hundred meters. Against armored targets, however, penetration dropped sharply beyond 500 meters. Protection remained thin, even heavy machine guns threatened its sides. Yet the Panzer II introduced a critical improvement: a 3-man crew. Commander, dedicated gunner, and driver. That separation of duties sharpened battlefield awareness and accelerated reaction time during fast-moving operations. In May 1940, during the invasion of France, the 7th Panzer Division under General Erwin Rommel relied heavily on Panzer II tanks. Rommel's division surged nearly 200 miles in less than 2 weeks. Panzer II units scouted ahead, identified weak points, and exploited breakthroughs opened by heavier formations. Panzer II crews confronted British Matilda II infantry tanks, boasting 78 mm of frontal armor. The 20 mm shells simply bounced off. British 2-pounder anti-tank guns outranged and outmatched the light German tanks by late 1941. A British War Office assessment after Operation Compass in 1940 described German light tanks as nimble. What shocked Allied observers earlier in France was not protection, but coordination. Radios and disciplined crew layout amplified limited firepower into operational shock. By 1942, facing Soviet T-34 tanks with 45 numbered sloped armor, the Panzer II stood obsolete. Production shifted toward self-propelled gun variants such as the Marder II. The transitional tank had served its purpose. Now Germany demanded a true medium. Faster than infantry support tanks, stronger than light reconnaissance vehicles. The next evolution would attempt to balance mobility with genuine battlefield punch. Panzer III, the backbone of early Blitzkrieg Panzer III, Ausführung E through J. When it entered service in 1939, this was no longer a stopgap. It was purpose-built to destroy enemy tanks. Early models carried a 37mm K36 gun. Later variants mounted the more powerful 50mm K39. With up to 15mm of frontal armor and a fully rotating turret, the 20-ton Panzer II embodied Germany's first true main battle tank concept. 5 men operated it. Each had a role. This was operational maturity forged in steel. Unlike earlier designs, the Panzer III separated the commander from the gunner and loader. That decision mattered. The commander could observe, issue orders, and coordinate by radio, while the gunner focused on aiming. Formations maneuvered as cohesive units rather than isolated machines. During the Battle of France in May-June 1940, Panzer III units spearheaded breakthroughs that encircled Allied forces at Dunkirk. In June 1941, during Operation Barbarossa, more than 960 Panzer III tanks surged across a 1,800-mile front. The 1st Panzer Group under General Ewald von Kleist drove nearly 300 miles in weeks, trapping Soviet armies at Uman and later Kiev. Speed and coordination annihilated fragmented resistance. Then came shock. Soviet T-34 tanks appeared with 45 mm of sharply sloped armor and a 76.2 mm gun capable of penetrating German armor beyond 1,000 meters. The Panzerguller's 15 mm gun struggled to achieve reliable penetration past 500 meters. At close range, it could kill. At distance, it faltered. A Soviet tanker from the 4th Tank Brigade recalled in October 1941. Their shells bounced from our sloped armor, but they attacked from every direction. What truly mattered was crew efficiency and communication. By 1943, the Panzer III reached its limits. Engineers could not mount larger guns without overloading the chassis. After roughly 700 units, production ceased. Many holes became Stugummissierza assault guns, shifting from offensive thrust to defensive firepower. The backbone had stiffened Germany's early victories. But it could not carry the war alone. As enemy armor thickened and battlefields expanded, Germany turned to a more adaptable design, one that would become the most produced and versatile tank of the conflict. Panzer IV, the workhorse of the Wehrmacht. Panzer IV, Ausführung A through H. When it entered service in 1937, it was not conceived as a tank killer. It carried a short-barreled 75-100 Kiub K-37 gun designed to fire high, explosive shells against infantry and fortifications. Its early armor measured 30 mm at the front. Reliable, steady, unremarkable. Yet by 1942, this same chassis mounted the long-barreled 75-100 KK-40 ELV-43 and later ELV-48. High-velocity guns capable of penetrating roughly 90 mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The transformation turned support vehicle into battlefield equalizer. The Panzer IV weighed about 25 tons and carried a 5-man crew, maintaining the efficient layout pioneered in the Panzer III. Over 500 units rolled off production lines, making it Germany's most numerous medium tank. At the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, Panzer IV Osf and F-2 tanks under General Erwin Rommel engaged British Shermans and Crusaders, commanded by General Bernard Montgomery. Across open desert at distances exceeding 1,000 meters, the upgraded 75 mm gun restored a measure of tactical parity. In July 1943, during Operation Citadel at Kursk, Panzer IVs formed the backbone of formations such as the 48th Panzer Corps. Their guns could destroy T-34s at approximately 200 meters, briefly matching Soviet firepower. Hundreds advanced into layered defenses of mines and anti-tank guns. Firepower improved. Strategic reality did not. A U.S. Army Ordnance report from Tunisia in 1943 concluded that the long-barreled Panzer IV outranged our early Shermans by several hundred yards. That assessment captured the shift. The decisive factor was not thicker armor, but the extended reach of its gun. Yet by 1944, additional armor plates and side skirts, increased weight, straining suspension and engines. Allied air superiority hunted columns relentlessly. American and Soviet factories outproduced Germany by the thousands. Though Panzer IVs fought until May 1945, they could not compensate for overwhelming numbers. While the Panzer IV carried the war on its tracks, German engineers searched for something more ambitious, an answer to Soviet armor that demanded even greater firepower. Sarin. Panther, the response to the T-34 Panther, Panzerkampfwagen V. When German engineers studied the Soviet T-34 in late 1941, they saw a warning written in steel: sloped armor, wide tracks, a powerful gun. In response, Germany unveiled the 45-ton Panther in 1943. It carried the long-barreled 7500 kW K42-1270, a high-velocity cannon capable of penetrating approximately 138 km of armor at 1,000 meters. Its 80-nm glacis plate sloped sharply, increasing effective protection without excessive weight. On paper, it was technological overmatch, allowing Panthers to destroy enemy tanks at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. A Maybach V12 engine pushed the machine to roughly 46 km/h on roads. 5 crewmen operated within a well-organized interior, preserving the command efficiency established in earlier designs. The Panther debuted at the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. Around 200 vehicles from the 51st and 52nd Panzer battalions rolled toward Soviet lines. Before many reached combat, mechanical failures crippled over 40%. Engines overheated. Final drives collapsed under stress. When functioning, Panthers tore through T-34s at long range. By June 1944 in Normandy, divisions such as the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend fielded Panther battalions against Allied landings. In hedgerow country, Panthers knocked out Sherman tanks beyond 1,500 meters, often striking before American crews could respond. Approximately 6,000 Panthers were produced between 1943 and 1945. A British tanker from the 11th Armored Division recalled in August 1944, "The Panther could kill us long before we could reply." The fear was real. What shocked Allied crews was not just armor thickness, but the lethal reach of its gun combined with precise optics. Yet complexity carried a cost. Interleaved road wheels distributed weight effectively, but clogged with mud and ice, complicating repairs on the Eastern Front. Fuel shortages in 1944-45 reduced operational ranges in some sectors to under 100 miles. A tactical superiority could not offset Allied air power and industrial mass. If the Panther represented calculated evolution, the next German design would pursue dominance through sheer intimidation, from Blitzkrieg to collapse. In September 1939, lightly armored Panzer I tanks raced across Poland, their 13-nm armor thin, but their radios decisive. 6 years later, in April 1945, the 188-ton Panzer VE Maas sat immobilized as the Reich collapsed around it. Between those two machines lies the full arc of German armored warfare, rising from agile experimentation to steel leviathans, too heavy for the bridges they crossed. In June 1941, Panzer III formations encircled Soviet armies at Kiev with precision and speed. In October 1942 at El Alamein, long-barreled Panzer IVs restored temporary parity at 1,000 meters. In July 1943 at Kursk, Tiger I and Panther tanks destroyed enemies beyond 1,500 meters, their 8A BEM Keb K-36 and 75 mm K-42 guns tearing through armor. Each escalation brought greater firepower and thicker plates. 100 nm, 150 nm, even 2,000 nm. Each escalation also brought heavier fuel consumption, strained transmissions, and mounting production costs. Allied intelligence recognized the paradox. A 1944 U.S. War Department assessment called the Tiger probably the best armored vehicle in existence. Yet American factories produced Shermans by the tens of thousands. Germany built approximately 347 Tiger I tanks and fewer than 500 Tiger Hueys. At Kursk in July 1943, the most advanced tanks on Earth stalled not for lack of lethality, but for lack of endurance. Mines, fuel shortages, and mechanical attrition, tactical brilliance collided with strategic exhaustion. German tanks remain engineering icons, studied in military academies and preserved in museums. Their evolution from Panzer I to Maas reveals a central truth. Technical superiority can dominate a battlefield, but it cannot compensate for depleted resources, fractured logistics, and the relentless pressure of global industrial war.